All right, welcome everybody to the Phys Ed Summit 2017. My name is Jorge Rodriguez, and I'm going to be your moderator for this session. And we are going to be talking to Jace Ferguson about why you should have fundamental games in your PE program. So before we get to Jace, I do want to talk a little bit about some technical issues if we have any. I don't anticipate any, but if we do, if for any reason the video feed drops out, make sure you stay on the Tozzle because we're going to put a new link to the new video feed on the Tozzle if we have to. But again, I don't anticipate any technical problems. At the end of the Phys Ed Summit, make sure you check out physedagogy.com where you'll find a feedback survey and also your professional development certificate. So we'd appreciate any kind of feedback that you can give us on the Phys Ed Summit. So without any further ado, I'm gonna let Jace kind of introduce himself, and he will take it away from there. So it's all you, Jace.
And thank you everybody for waking up and joining us. Well, this morning for you here in Dubai, it's the evening, so thank you for joining us, and just as excited as I am because this is always a great opportunity to share some content and perfect. So let's get that out of there. Google, get out of there, Google. All right, so my session is titled Why Have a Fundamental Games Unit? And you'll notice that I have that hashtag physical literacy because the thing is fundamental games are part of this physical literacy concept, which some of you may have heard before, some of you may have been quite familiar with it, but some of you, this might be a new concept that's been hearing and you're kind of curious as to what it is. And we're gonna kind of explore a little bit of what physical literacy is. So first off, we're going to look at why physical literacy, why is this such an impactful concept that our students can benefit from, and also start looking at the planning behind the unit. So look at how I kind of integrated physical literacy concepts into the unit and how it can look like, and look at some assessment tools I've built into that as well. So a little bit about myself to start. So originally I'm from Alberta, Canada, and I've transitioned my way into Dubai and loving it. So back in 2006, I graduated from University of Alberta from the Bachelor of Education with a physical education focus. So from most of my career, I've been a PE specialist throughout Alberta until about 2014, where I was in junior high school focus. While I was working full-time, I decided to go get my master's from Ohio University. So I got my master's in science and recreation and sports science, but the focus was, what were the pathways to optimal athlete development? And this is where I was first introduced to the concept of physical literacy and the pathways that students can have. Also throughout my career before I left Alberta, I was also part of the HPEC, so the Health and Physical Education Council of Alberta, where I was the Vice President of Pedagogy and Curriculum Development, where I was trying to develop programs to get this out there and also to promote physical literacy and the concept into our teaching. Now I am at the Universal American School of Dubai, where this year my role is I'm teaching a sports science class. I'm also teaching some phys ed classes. I'm also teaching some character education classes. And I'm also a grade level coordinator for one of the grades in high school. So kind of all over the place, but still keeping my foot grounded in the phys ed realm. So why physical literacy? And when I think of this why physical literacy, and I came across this YouTube video, and this is probably the best example of why physical literacy and why it can be such an important concept for students. So here we go.
Welcome to American Ninja Warrior Denver City Finals. Our next athlete is Lila McCall. She's got her Girls Are Superstars shirt on and she's ready to go. 3, 2, 1. First up is the newly redesigned quintuple steps, a new obstacle for her this year, but she's making short work of it. On to the fourth one, through to the fifth one, and look at that, no hands, all right. And onto the balance beam. She's pretty familiar with this. No scaredy cats this time. And now onto a new obstacle, the teeter log. got a big crowd here today cheering her on. And whoa, almost falls off there. Now onto the cargo climb. Very quickly up the cargo climb, up to the top, over the log, crosses over the first shed through the grocery cart conference table. Now that's the second cart reference we've seen there. Not really sure what that is. Just neat inside joke. All right, now she's on her way down the second shed on the roof, onto the platform, across the bridge.
Hey Jace, the sound is a bit muffled. If you unplug your headphones, I think that'll help with the sound.
And here she goes. Oh my goodness, and look at that, one-handed over the water bottles. And she makes it, no problem. Now, onto the hanging steps at Christmas Tree Corner. There is every Christmas tree that Lila has decorated in her 5 years. Kind of a strange collection, but also kind of cool, I guess. She's working her way through this very tough section. It requires a lot of concentration. And whoa, almost falls off there. That was very close, but she regains her balance. Got a big smile on her face. And she's done it. Now, on to the next obstacle actually made by Lila. Log things. Makes it look easy, even skipping a few at the end there. Now she's on her way to the warp wall, getting a running start. And yes, she's made it up the warp wall. 2 minutes and 23 seconds, and she's on her way to Vegas.
So with that video, after watching that, like for me, that is the perfect prime example of physical literacy in action. So when I first watched this video, I kind of asked myself, how was she able to do that? We have a 5-year-old child doing some pretty incredible things, especially with controlling her body throughout a variable of movements. But then I realized I was asking myself the wrong question. Why was she able to do that? What were the things that happened in the background leading up to this as to give her the motivation to do that? Because kids are inherently want to move and have a lot of fun, but that was a challenging course. It'd be challenging for a lot of us adults. So the thing about I started asking is like, why was she able to do that? And this kind of ties in this idea of physical literacy and the ability to start moving and to be physically literate. So why design a fundamental games unit? With this idea of physical literacy, and I'm going to explain to you a little bit more what it is these fundamental skills, so the skills that we just saw her do, the running, the jumping, the balancing, these are all the fundamental skills that a lot of people require to be successful, just be healthy, to be successful athletes, but also just to be physically literate as well. And I started looking at the students that I currently teach, and I started finding a lot of holes, and especially a lot of holes in their physical literacy development, especially around fundamental movement skills. One of my roles at the school is I also coach our varsity team. And this is where I really see a lot of the holes in their learning. So a lot of gaps in learning. So I started thinking to myself, how can we get these fundamental skills? First off, how can we kind of assess where our students are at with these fundamental skills? How can we get them involved in the process, get them on board in the journey, and have them kind of identify the areas that they need to develop to be physically literate and to be active? So why physical literacy? And this graphic is a really great example of what physical literacy is. So physical literacy is kind of the foundation. If we want to be recreational, so have fun playing throughout our lives, or if you want to get into that competitive stream or even that elite professional athlete stream, this is all built on the foundation of physical literacy. And sometimes this is developed quite well through conscious and purposeful planning, but sometimes this is also missed. And without this aspect, we can't be successful in a lot of these other areas. So if you're going to go into the recreation activity, if you're going to go into the competitive or the elite, you need that strong foundation of physical literacy. So what is physical literacy? Physical literacy, there's a lot of different definitions going out there, but one of my favorites is to move with competence and confidence in a wide variety of physical activities and multiple environments. You need to be able to have the competence and the confidence. That is the most important part, is the confidence aspect, being motivated to be challenged, to put yourself in challenging areas, to be to be able to take on a wide variety of different multiple environments, not just to move in one area, not just to specialize, like I'm only move on land, but to specialize in other areas so you can enjoy physical literacy throughout your lifespan. With physical literacy, how this ties into education is this kind of builds into personal success for our students. It all starts with like having an idea for physical fitness, which moves into physical health, which leads into healthy lifestyles, habits, social skills, psychological wellness, mental health, cognitive, and educational success. I had a meeting with our school here lately, and we talked a lot about our student wellness. And one of the things that I wanted to really champion this year is like, we need to get our students moving and just playing. High stress, especially with our IB school, is we need to just get the kids playing as kids. And this is where the idea of physical literacy ties into educational success. Because kids who move more, learn more, and are more successful when it comes to those tests, especially those IB tests, because of the high stakes, the pressure that is on them. When I was doing my research for my master's, I came across this idea of like Canadian Sport for Life. So one thing that Canadian Sport for Life, they developed is they've almost developed like a framework for physical literacy geared towards athletes. But taking a look at it, this also ties into a lot of the developmental frameworks of what our students could be potentially achieving during certain ages. So it starts, if you look at the numbers, active starts from 0 to 6. There's a framework and benchmark of skills for students and children between those ages, which transitions into fundamentals, learning to train, all the way up to being active for life. And that is ultimately the end goal for any successful physical education program, is we want our students to have the tools to be active for life outside of our mentorship. Ultimately, that is our goal, and this is a great framework that kind of helps us guide us into that right direction. To chunk it down a little bit more, and we can look into it a little more specifically, is each of these has a goal. So our active start is they're learning the basic movement skills and link them together into play. Keyword here is play, and developing those habits of being active. Fun. Having fun being active. That moves into our fundamentals. So learning the fundamental movement skills, building agility, balance, and coordination. Goes into learning to train. So this is where students can learn to high performance for those with appropriate skills and motivation. And then from this point, we can actually transition into a few different streams where we can be just trained to train, or students can just move into the active for life phase. They have those fundamental skills developed. They have the ability to apply them and perform them. Some students can be ready for active for life. They want to go in that recreation stream. Some students want to go in that competitive stream, which can be that train to train. So building up the aerobic base, developing the speed, strength, and even moving to those elite areas where we look at kind of mental preparedness, all those things ready to earn at a high level. Unfortunately, with the idea of this is we need to have those fundamentals in place, because without that fundamental development, without that motivation to want to move, we can't transition to that learning to train, which unfortunately we can't transition to active for life. And that is where we sometimes lose a lot of students and a lot of kids. So you can see the importance of physical literacy, but it's not just a little simple area. Going back to our graphic, we have our physical literacy aspect down here at the bottom, ready to go. It is our foundations, our training to compete, train to train, train to win, competitive for life, active for life. I had an issue looking at this graphic the first time, because on the side you can see physical literacy for life, which is awesome, excellent. What about those students that have those gaps in their learning? What about those international students who've been moving around? What about those students who didn't have the opportunity to develop them in their homes, in their schools? What about those students who missed that ability to develop those physical literacy skills to be successful and move into the active for life? This is where I had the idea of remedial physical literacy development. Taking that time to assess, look at what we have, look at what we're missing, and also assess the needs of our students. Sometimes you need to take a step back, look at what we're missing, develop those before we can move forward. So the idea of remedial physical literacy is something that I really kind of focused around this idea of fundamental games. Breaking it down even more, our fundamental sports skills and fundamental movement skills are developed so early in their age that without these, we can't move into that physical literacy realm, which moves for active for life. And we potentially, our students are missing the opportunity to become that competitive or elite level athletes because we are missing this such crucial foundation. So what are fundamental movement skills? Like I mentioned earlier, go back to the video of our little girl, she's obviously demonstrating body control, locomotor control, and object control skills as well. All those are into smaller categories, so agility and balance, coordination, our locomotor, running, jumping, swimming, which she demonstrated with ease, sending, receiving, dribbling, and striking. So we have all these skills kind of chunked up into 3 major categories, which when I look at some of our students, especially in the international schools, we have some of these students have holes. They might have the ability to run and jump, but they sometimes run and jump and they don't have that body control. They sometimes look clumsy, sometimes they injure themselves. The object control skill I coach our varsity boys volleyball, and this is one skill where I see students especially struggle with if they have these gaps. Just to have the ability to contact a ball with different body parts, have the ability to control it. Sometimes, like if we don't have those foundation skills, we don't have the ability to perform at that competitive and elite level, which they're potentially missing out on those opportunities. We look back at our locomotor skills. So the bottom line is, if you can run, if you can throw, if you can swim, this opens up everything. You open up yourself to such a variety of different activities out there. So if you can be able to run, you can play soccer, basketball, volleyball. If you can throw, you're opening yourselves up to these. But if you can't, you're potentially missing out on all these opportunities to take part in, especially after school throughout your life course. One of the most important lessons I learned as an adult is you might have these opportunities to go out there, play these different games, play games you never played before. But if you don't have these fundamental skills, you're missing that opportunity. And you're missing that opportunity. It could be a business opportunity where you're trying to build just a feeling with your colleagues. You're missing that opportunity to just meet new people. If you're missing those fundamental movement skills, you're going to be missing the motivation to want to participate and want to engage and carry on. So that's my little crash course in physical literacy. Before I move on, does anybody have any questions about kind of physical literacy? I know I kind of went through it hopefully in depth. Does anybody have any questions about it at this time?
Doesn't look like any questions on the causal yet. If anybody chimes in, I will definitely let you know.
All right, perfect. Okay, so let's transition to the planning behind the unit. So when I look at planning, when I plan my lessons, plan my units, I want quality sport and physical activity. And inside of these, obviously there's a physical literacy aspect. There's also the excellence. So where can we develop that motivation to become excellent for our students? Where do we develop that idea that they can strive for success? And then we have the active for life. So when I kind of plan, I look at all these 3 areas and I want to make sure that I'm integrating those into my planning process. So kind of at this point, we're going to transition out of the slide. I'm going to show you kind of my planning guide. And that's really where I started to combine a lot of the concepts between physical literacy and also kind of inquiry-based learning, and kind of give you the planning behind the unit, and also how I would be assessing the students and getting them involved in the assessment process as well.
So Jace, one question that did come up was about students with disabilities. Is there a modified physical literacy format for those students?
From everything I've seen, I haven't been able to come across anything that was modified for students with disabilities. But that would also be a great place for a lot of educators to make a tailor-made kind of experience for those students, because they have unique challenges and unique opportunity to develop. They can still develop those physical literacy skills to be active for life, and they have that unique opportunity to make that. So that would be just a kind of a lot of critical planning on the educator's part. But that's definitely something I would love to see if anybody ever came up with that. Okay, are there any questions?
No, that's it for now.
All right, so first off, looking at this, I was kind of like, all right, where am I going to look at? So when I start planning my unit, I can obviously look at what are my experiences and my dimensions of learning. And I've actually made this whole folder available to everybody in the TOSL. So if you kind of walk through it at the same time, if you just want to watch, that's totally up to you. You have access to copy it and also to use it as your own. What I did with this is I took the IB PYP planning model, mixed it with my old planning methodology I use in Alberta, applied with some ideas with inquiry-based learning, and also with kind of focusing on the concept of just physical literacy, because with the conceptual learning, it's not the learning the how, it's learning the why. Why do we need to move? Why do we need to be, why is this important? So why be physically literate? So looking at our physical literacy expectations or experiences, this goes through a whole different dynamic of so many different experiences that students can have to be physically literate. So looking back into this, we have some of our dimensions. We have the alternative environments, we have the dance abilities, we have the games, types of gymnastics, and individual activities. So we also have all these opportunities that are kind of listed for different types of activities to apply to those dimensions and those experiences. For our grades 7 to 12, again, we have a list of all these age-appropriate activities which can be easily used to help plan what you'll be doing in that unit, but also to help you kind of get a different idea to help bring balance to some of your teaching as well. One thing I found working with a lot of professionals is dance. Sometimes we miss it. Sometimes we don't get the ability to develop that dance literacy for students to move, to be able to simply just dance and dance to the rhythm. So for this one, I looked at the cooperative games aspect. So my fundamental games is focused really on playing a lot of cooperative games. It's a lot of fielding, striking, net and wall, target and invasion games. Movement evaluation and competency, that'd be another area that we'd be looking at for having the students evaluate and look at their fundamental movement skills. First step I take in the planning process is why. Why are we learning this? That is one question every student should be asking, is why are we doing this? Why are we learning this? And it's not out of disrespect, it's so they can understand the concept. So the central idea behind the unit is why are we learning this? Well, through the use of games, we can evaluate our own fundamental skill development, progression, and areas of improvement in an environment that fosters growth, development, and collaboration. So the idea is I need to help the students understand where they're at, how they can get to where they want to be, and also to help each other improve as well. And that's a key aspect, is creating that culture of help and development, because physical literacy isn't a solo journey. It's one you share with people throughout your life. All right, what do we want to learn? So with this, I kind of taken something that I came across from the New South Wales Education District out of Australia. And what they've done is they kind of came across a physical literacy continuum. So this kind of further breaks down, and this isn't just sports related, because Alberta or Canada Sports for Life, they developed that for sports specific. This one is physical literacy specific. So it's general to make sure everybody has the ability, and kind of gives you benchmarks as for what students should be able to do. Let me zoom in a little bit closer. So what they've ultimately done is they moved it into the 4 different competencies. So we have our movement competencies, which is developing the ability to move, so those locomotor and those fundamental skills. The tactical movement is you're thinking, can you apply the movement strategies? You can move, but can you apply them in tactics, and also can you modify? Motivation and behavioral skills, and so includes perseverance, includes initiative, working independently, setting goals and values, and just understanding the value of being physically active. And then personal and social attributes, because when you're active, especially in physical education, you're developing those personal and social skills. I've always called it the hidden curriculum, is you're working with people, you're playing with people, you're developing personal and social skills while you're also developing these movement skills and fundamental behaviors. So from these, they've also split up into even more, and they've given us some nice benchmarks. So for our stability skills, and this is really why I like this framework from the New South Wales, is they broke it down into kind of the fundamental movement skills, and it kind of gives you what the students should be able to do. So at the end of kindergarten, so cluster 1, they should be able to hold stable body position for 5 seconds. It gives you really good indicators of where a student should be at. This also gives you, the professional, a good indicator of, you have these students, you've evaluated them, you've looked at what they should be able to do. Is there an opportunity for you to step up and apply some remedial? Like, do you need to go back and maybe address an area of development? So if you look farther down, look at end of year 10, year 8, is it completely gets more complex, but they also combine. So all these skills combine into one area. So by this time, the students should be able to combine and focus, not focus, but apply these skills in, well, refine it. They can transition smoothly and also can apply it to new areas and dynamic sequences. So when I look at my planning, I kind of look back at this and I look at, okay, so from the physical competency domain, what would I like my students to achieve? So what are we going to be learning about? What are the things that they need to be able to successfully identify and say, I can do that at the end of this unit? So I kind of go through and pick, all right, well, if I'm going with grade, this one's designed for high school, so this is grade 10s, is first off, applying and refining these movement skills in a range of increasingly complex. Now, if I could sit there and if I assess and evaluate my students and see they can't do that, this gives me the indicator that we need to take a step back. We need to do some remedial physical literacy development, especially with our fundamental movement skills. Motivation and confidence, so they should be able to modify and the physical and social environment to increase opportunities. So by this time, they should have that opportunity, the idea of fair play. This is a really good area. So what should the students be able to do? And where as an educator can I step in to help develop and foster learning? So I've kind of gone through all those 4 domains from that framework and kind of picked and choose which ones I would like to do. Did I pick all of them from the same one? Definitely not, because I want to have a really focused approach. In other units, the other approaches are going to be addressed. But right now, I really wanted to focus on the fundamental movement skills and developing that motivation and that competency to self-assess and evaluate. One of the things working with the IB is the personal, social, and physical education related concepts. So this is kind of tying to that whole idea of the hidden curriculum. And the IB has done an awesome job kind of creating these. So this was a really great guideline for me. So when we're working with our students, like they're going to be developing those ideas of identity, and some of the concepts behind that is like autonomy, character, diversity, ethnicity, fulfillment, even within active living. What does it mean to be active? What does it mean to apply that in your life? Also through interactions as well, sense of that belonging, that citizenship, that community. When I sit down and look at my units, I kind of look at, all right, well, what are our concepts we want to kind of approach in this? Can you approach them all? You definitely could, but taking a focused approach, especially when you tailor make it and assess it with your students to see where they're at, you can kind of introduce that, develop those things that you feel that the students would need to develop, or the students can self-identify, and you can also modify from that point. So looking at some of the things I looked at, so the identity strands, perseverance, character, initiative. So taking that opportunity to challenge yourself, put yourself in a situation to assess your skills, and also show initiative for wanting to improve and progress, keep on moving. Our active living strands, so body control, goal setting, improvement, mastery, and interaction, so belonging. Number 1 for me is belonging and then community, developing that culture, and also the idea of fair play. For me, like, for especially in our high school students, the idea of fair play should definitely be integrated throughout, and students should be promoting each other to play equally. It's like, get them out there to play. Now, this section is obviously the curriculum standards, because not only do here at our school we have the IB concepts, but also we are linked to the SHAPE standards. So this is an excellent place where you can just kind of look at your standard 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. See which ones you're going to hit and see which ones you want to integrate on. So from this, I just have a nice link right to the SHAPE standards, and I can kind of go through which ones we're going to be focusing on today. So if we're in kindergarten or elementary, great. Well, this is also grade 1 through 6. We can look at, take that, apply it, and then put it right back into our plan. So this is where I would sit down and look at, okay, what standards am I hitting with these activities I have planned? Now, when I'm actually going through this process, I'm a lineal thinker. So I'm going through each of these steps, moving forward into the next, I might have an idea of what activities I would like to do, but I kind of look at, all right, what concept do I want to do? What are some of the ideas to do behind it? And then tailor make the activities to meet those experiences that would have planned. Now, looking at assessment, how might we know what we have learned? When we look at assessment, and I came across this last year, and this has really changed how I look at assessment practices, is there's assessments on a continuum. On our left side, we have assessment for learning. How come I can't get, there we go. Then we have assessment as learning, and then obviously to the right side, we have assessment of learning. And how this continuum works is from right to left, we have student control involved. On the right side, there's a lot of student control, a lot of student presence. On the left is very little. It's mostly teacher focused. Obviously, the assessment of learning is we're all held accountable to report cards. We're all accountable to some way to report to parents the achievement of the student. So this is where kind of the marks, the report cards come in. So this is what we assess what students have learned. This is at the end, after we've gone through the process, where are they at the end of this part of their journey? Sometimes students aren't directly involved. Definitely certifies a student's competence. But it also ultimately communicates and reveals the student's level of understanding. On the flip side, we have assessment for learning. So this is assessing students' progress and learning needs. This is often such a critical time, especially with fundamental movement skill development. This needs to be an ongoing process, but also needs to be a friendly and constructive process as well. Students are directly involved in the assessment process. This is where the students are in control. They could be through either self-evaluation, self-identification, all the way to peer coaching. I'll talk about it, how I've kind of integrated peer coaching into this as well. And I found that it's been an excellent tool because once you put the students in the driver's seat, you're a facilitator, they're the mentor, and it's an amazing experience. This is usually filled with lots of descriptive feedback. Teacher and student work together to improve students' learning, and this is a continual process. And then assessment as learning. So this is the student's cognition about their learning. So they're actively involved in monitoring and assessing. So assessment for kind of the best way to look at it is, okay, where am I at? As of learning is the middle of the journey. Where am I going? How am I getting there? And then assessment of learning is almost like, unfortunately, the best way to describe it is the end of the learning experience. Where did I end up at? But the thing with assessment is it's not just one-way road. It is a continual process. We have to report on report cards. We have to send some form home, but that's not the end of the line. The best thing I love about this, and this ties into an old saying I heard from one of my old principals, is assessment shouldn't be an autopsy. It's not the tag on the toe to say this is where you're at. Assessment should be you're checking the oil. As you're going on a long road trip, you're constantly checking and assessing where things are at. So this is a great kind of framework and idea behind it. So using this framework and idea is I've kind of looked at, all right, I have my competencies, I have my concepts, I have my standards. How am I going to see where the students are at? One of the things we have at our school is for our assessment of learning is we have kind of an assessment policy for our students. And these are built around the SHAPE standards. So all those 5 areas of the SHAPE standards, they're built into this. So they're kind of built into the standard 5, which is the value of physical activity, critical thinking, understanding, standard 3, movement competencies, and cooperation and leadership. So when we report on our report card comments and our report card marks, we are gearing all those assessments of and for learning and as learning towards ultimately this. Those other assessments may look a little bit different than this, but they directly tie in. And if you look back, and I did a session on this, I can't remember when I did it, but a lot of the language comes straight from the curricular outcomes. So you can take, so this is obviously a great example of standards-based assessment where it gives the students some clear idea what they are capable of and also how they can move into the next level. So ultimately, all my other assessments, because that is our assessment policy practices, all my other assessments directly tie into how I'm going to report back to these students. So one thing I started looking at is, okay, well, let's look at our pre-assessment. What are we going to do for our students? And if you haven't followed Joey Fife and gone to physicaleducator.com, you are missing out on a ton of stuff, because this is a great idea. I would love to say that I'm as smart as Joey for thinking this, but I'm definitely not. So when I'm thinking of my learning roadmap is the fundamental games, I'm looking at my movement competencies. And here, let me just kind of zoom in a little bit more. This is where I tie them directly to the specific standards that I already planned out that I'm going to approach. So the students are demonstrating competency and or refines the activity, specific movement skills, all those other things. Right from the curriculum, right from the SHAPE handbook, that is there. So chunk it down into our different skills, so our stability skills, object control skills, locomotor, and combination skills. But one thing you'll notice is this language is the exact same out of the curriculum, but I just placed that almost there. For me, mastery might be different at a high school level than at the elementary level, but that is where you can have a little bit of freedom to apply where you want your students to end up. So if a student can demonstrate to me that that outcome, that's awesome. That's a level 3. That's not mastery though. When the student can apply and refine and adapt and improve, and also to help others and to coach others to apply those skills, that is true mastery. Especially like I'm looking at it from the high school level, when students can step out and coach others and teach others, they become the teacher. That is true mastery of those skills. Or we can look at, can identify movement skills in a range of physical activity contexts but are performed out of control and non-intentional. So really clear and specific kind of benchmarks as to where students would be at. And this is going to be a great tool for the students to go back and say, okay, I'm going to assess where am I at on this? So at the end of this, it could be a quick reflection, or it could be tied into a Google form. So we kind of go back into this. So pre-unit self-assessment, throwing the learning roadmap on there. Who's my students? Who are they going to be? Where are they at? Where are you at? So have students kind of self-assess. Okay, where are you at with your stability skills? Are you level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4? Give them the time to kind of look at it. I can apply, I can refine, I can do all these things, or I'm not quite there yet. This kind of goes through all of them, and then they could submit, and those go kind of directly back to the students. Those are sent, like, it's for the students to keep. We could also be using this for if we're using peer coaching. So there's an opportunity where I might have some students in the room who could be sitting out, or they're just waiting for their shift to play it in a game, where they can kind of take their smartphone, take their device, and kind of give their friend an assessment. There's going to be partners created where they can kind of give them like, oh, well, this is what I saw from you today. So if I was Mr. Ferguson, this is what I would be saying to you. It's a really powerful tool, especially for helping the students along that learning road. So looking at that peer assessment tool, so what would the student look like? One of the things I am planning with this is to take this tool and to have the students, and this one's actually quite in depth, but it goes into a lot of areas where the students can be at. So first off, who are they observing, and are they physically literate? So obviously this would happen after we've had the conversation. Okay, this is why we're doing the unit. This is why we're developing these skills through these games. And it goes through just can they demonstrate? So this is it chunks everything down to give the students even more specific feedback, but it's not from me. It is from their peers. And this is where we build that idea of that culture of trust, that culture of, well, we're all in this collaborative learning environment together. We're here to learn together as a group. So this is definitely after you have to foster that idea behind it. This isn't a place where we're judging. This is a place where we are helping each other along our educational journey. So throughout all this, I've kind of sat down and developed a lot of these rubrics and kind of these tools I'm going to be using to assess. The great thing about this is I can also apply this to any other unit that I'm learning, because are we going to teach these concepts just once? Definitely not. These concepts are going to be reappearing throughout the year and kind of be, I wouldn't say following the students, but promoting the students along throughout their journey throughout the high school year. So the great thing about this is when these are developed, you can definitely use them down the road. You can use them next week, the next day, the next year, unless your outcomes completely change. So there's kind of looking at all the assessment tools that I would be looking at, kind of transitioning from that assessment for learning, where are they at in the journey, then ultimately, where is the ending point? How am I going to give these students a summative grade? What am I going to put on their report card marks? Once I have my assessments kind of done, now I need to start thinking about the nuts and bolts, the pedagogy behind it. How am I going to teach this? I'm looking at the what. What am I going to teach? How? So reflective questions and inquiry process. So some of the great things is there's a ton of information out there and a lot of great work done. And this is from Andy Vasily, who's kind of put together this model for inquiry through PE. And every one of my units, I kind of phase in all of these questions and this kind of learning process, because this also helps guide me through, okay, what sort of things should I be doing as an educator as we get to this lesson, as we get to this lesson? How should I be progressing my students? So obviously you introduce it with starting the inquiry journey. So what sort of questions are we going to have? Introduce it. What's the central idea? What sort of questionings are we going to be using? And then the learning experiences. Like, what are we going to be doing to learn and promote the understanding of this concept? Move into stage 4, which is our accumulation. So by the end of the unit, we should be able to demonstrate what learning looks like. And then the 5th one is taking action. What might this action look like? So with our phases, and also Nathan Horn also done some great work. And the thing is, a lot of people have done this great work for us, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes you just take it and polish it and make it special for your students. So if you look at some of the reflective questions, so Nathan's kind of gone through this inquiry process, and he's gone through like, hey, tuning in, what sort of questions can an educator ask? So like, how does it make you feel? What other activity sports are similar to this? What experience have you already had? Taking some of these, you can make your own questions, feel free, but you can also take some of these, because some of these are excellent questions, and taking those and applying it, those are ultimately going to be your key teaching points for those units or for those lessons as you progress throughout the unit. So a lot of great work has already been done. So just applying this work and integrating it into your practice. So already planning, what sort of questions can I ask? So I've taken both of these, looked at what sort of questions do I want to be asking or focusing on throughout my teaching practice of this unit? What do I want the focus to be? Remember, we're not just teaching them games, we're also teaching the students how to understand why we are doing the things we're doing. So these questions usually turn into my key teaching points and also my focus of the day. Once I got my focus kind of figured out, the questions I want to ask, all right, what activities are we going to be doing? Now, at everyone's point in their career, they always sit down and make these beautiful lesson plans, which are awesome. Lesson planning is great. This takes that all and kind of ties it into one place. So if I'm in my first lesson, okay, starting the journey, the questions we're going to be looking at that day. Why might this be of value or interest to you? And what strategies or tactics can you use during this game? And I just simply have the links to the games I'd be using. Some of these are links just from the website. Some of these are links from files that I've already developed. Equipment I need, but also how am I going to assess for that day? So what am I going to be introducing? So this is where the first one, our pre-assessment, where the student's going to be at, filling out that Google form. I want them to pre-assess their own abilities, where they are at. So as we go through, we're starting our journey, spend a couple days starting the journey. So going through the questions of what type of questions should I be focusing on, questions I should be asking the students, all these other things that are definitely going to be guiding my teaching practice. Obviously, we go into the activities. So we have our East Lake Ball, and this kind of goes over from there. So as we progress, I go through the different phases of the inquiry process, different questions I'm going to be focusing on, helping the students move forward. Then also getting more and more peer feedback and a little bit more assessment to help that learning journey happen. Because ultimately, every good thing comes to an end, where we have our accumulation, which this is where I need to sit down and make that assessment. So where are the students at summatively? Where have they come on our assessment practice, our assessment scale? And by this point, students should know where they're at. So if the assessments are clear and concise, the students are going to know by the end, I am a 5 out of 6. I demonstrated this. I know it. And that's the key with assessment, is it needs to be clear and first, and also student friendly so they can understand it. So by this time, it shouldn't be a shock to the students. But this is also through a lot of coaching with it, through a lot of peer feedback, through a lot of self-reflection. And then where do we go from here? So some of these games are more for high school students. You obviously see I have a student choice aspect there where the students can choose some of the previous games we've done in that unit, or they can choose a different game. So using a lot of Google Forms, using a lot of kind of information idea. That way, getting some student voice to getting some student choice into it. That is totally up to you if you'd like to do that. I find that it would be a great way to help accumulate the activity because the students plan the lesson, and that gives them the accountability, the pride of ownership. Because if you give them the opportunity to plan it, they're gonna love it because that's their product. They're like, hey, we're doing the game that we suggested. This is awesome. But it's not over. The reflection aspect, and reflection can't be more and more important. You can see I have some key questions for reflection, but this isn't filled out yet because it's not done. I haven't had the opportunity to fully run through this with the students yet. So looking at the end of this, I'm going to ask myself these questions because reflection is powerful. I've been asking our students to reflect throughout the entire unit. Now this is where I need to sit and reflect. Did I meet my inquiry questions? Did I do the things I wanted to do? Was I able to meet those needs of the students? Was I able to identify and help them assess where they're at in their fundamental skill development? Was this an effective unit? So having those questions kind of go through where it's at, making your own notes for next year, and that is it. So looking at this document, it's actually a 6-page document, but I've also kind of taken it. This would be something I would show the students. I'd be giving them a visual. This is our unit at a glance. So when they come into the lot change room, this is going to be what the students see. So why are we learning this? Here's our question why. What are we going to be learning? I'm going through those competencies, those physical literacy aspects that we've been learning about, focusing mostly on the value of physical activity, motivation and confidence, and physical competency, how we're going to be doing it, some of the games we're going to be playing, and then also some of the questions that they should be almost expecting to be answering throughout. So I would have this up for the students. They could take a look at it. I would post it up in their Google Classroom so they have access to it. For them, this is what the students want to see. All that other great stuff, that's great for us as professionals because we get that. That's what we're excited for. We love the planning process. Students want to know why we're learning it, what we're going to learn, how we're going to do it. And then what are the questions I'm going to be asked? And this gives them that opportunity to kind of wrap their heads around what's kind of coming their way in the following classes. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts behind the unit. Now, a lot of the games behind that unit are a lot of cooperative games. And I love using cooperative games because it's a great way for one to build community, and it's also a great way for students to assess their skills. Like I can also visually assess students, and I could talk to them about tactics. I could talk to them about this while we're transitioning. It's a great opportunity for me to step back, and also to give the students some rules, and also give them some accountability in their classes as well. So there's our planning. There's 11 minutes left. Lots of time for questions if there are any, but I almost want to end it with leaving you with this. So I've seen this, I can't remember where I've seen it before, but this haunts me. This follows me around in everything I do. The most dangerous phrase in the language is we've always done it this way. People sometimes get comfortable, get complacent, and we don't see progress. We don't see success. It's because this is how we've always done it. Whenever I ask that question, my number one that question is asked, or that response is, well, we've always done it this way. My question is why? Why have we always done it this way? What is the reasoning behind it? If it's sound reasoning, okay, well, can we adjust it for our students? Can we adjust it for their learning needs? So the question always, kind of the basic behind it is always question, not why or not how things are done, but why do we keep doing it the way we do? So If you have any questions on this, I've shared the kind of the unit folder in the Tozzle. There's also some areas you can contact me, but you can also take this time to just ask some questions. So are there any questions out there? We have a few minutes. If there's any questions, I could hopefully answer them.
So that's really, really awesome stuff there, Jace. So I'm looking at the toggle, and there aren't any questions right now. It's specifically on what you were presenting. So if there are any questions, just let us know, and I'll try to address them. So are you at an IB school?
So our school, it is a PYP IB school, but it's a KG2 to grade 12 school, and our middle school is not in the IB program, but our high school students are and our elementary students are. So throughout the school, you can see a lot of IB integration into it.
Okay. So one of the questions was about the links to the games. Let me see if I understand this. Do you have those anywhere else where people could see the games without the links? Possibly like a video?
So on those games, so the first two games I've just linked right to the physicaleducator.com. Those are links right off of Joey's site, and they give great videos. Some of the games are linked to just lesson plans I've developed throughout the years, and they're kind of the best way. So if I ever have a sub, I can just kind of print those off, give them to students, and be like, right, well, here you go. Here's what we need to do. Here's your activity. Some of them have videos, which are the most recent ones. Some of them are, like East Lake Ball has been something I've taught throughout my entire career. And I've not ever, one, I need to be more tech savvy to make a video, and two, I've never had the opportunity to find someone who's done it. So some of them have videos, some of them are just the laid out lesson plans, and some of them are not linked yet because I wanted to actually make some polished stuff to use for everybody. If you ever have any questions on what these games are, don't ever hesitate to ask, and I can send off what I have at this time.
Okay, the other question was about your progress report. Do you have a copy that you could share of your progress report?
The progress reports, do you mean like the report cards, or?
I think so. I think that's what they mean.
So with our report card, I'll speak to our elementary, because our report card for the high school is they're just given a number. So you take in kind of the averages, and if you look back at that assessment policy, is every area has a different weighting. So you take the weighting, most of the weighting is actually on, are you demonstrating the value of physical activity in the class? It's not even, we're not focusing on assessing students that can't do the certain things. That was the focus of the unit, but the focus is, do you find value in it? So we would take those averages and would give us a number at the end. In our elementary, they actually they give a specific number for each of those 4 areas. So they would see it's either a 1 to 4 on, are they demonstrating the value of physical education? Are they demonstrating the physical competencies? You'll see those 4 areas directly on their report card. One thing I've been toying with the past couple of years is having an open Google spreadsheet. So I've been using a lot of Google Classroom, and the great thing with that is it takes any input that you've put into any kind of assignments and makes it into a spreadsheet form. So students can look through and see what they've done. So they can also see what's going on with that and all those things. Were there any other questions out there?
I don't see any on the Tozzle, so this is great stuff. I really appreciate you kind of breaking it down for us. And I really like that IB framework as well, because I'm at an IB school, and I think it's really important to kind of start with the why and kind of go from there, and really having the kids to grasp that understanding of why they're doing what they're doing.
Well, and also, like, I've only been at this, like, IB, I've only been in the IB for 3 years, and it totally revolutionized the way I thought about delivering my curriculum to the students. At the early part of my career, it was a lot of skills based. Like, we need to get the students the skills to be active for life. But I was missing the understanding part, understanding why. So I was missing that. And I also started reading a book. It's actually called Starts With Why, which my administrators are probably sick of me asking why, because it's an important question to ask. And I want the students to be asking those same questions as well, and having the understanding by answering those questions.
Yeah, I read that book too by Simon Sinek, and it's a great book. So anybody out there that's interested in something like that, it's definitely a good one to start with. And one of the things I really like about IB as well is that you know, you have these transdisciplinary themes that go beyond the subject matter, and it really really, you know, you consider how you apply these things in your everyday life.
Well, exactly, and even just a comment on that. When I was working with our our elementary staff, we were trying to make genuine connections transdisciplinary. So what we ultimately ended up doing was creating our own questions that would sometimes they tied into. So, for example, in KG2, their question was, "Well, who are we?" So identity. But also one of the questions was, "How does light and waves affect?" I can't remember exactly, but that doesn't really necessarily tie into the curriculum and also the skills that are being developed and the understanding. So even taking the time to create your own central themes, your own central ideas, and then tying it where you can to make those genuine and enduring connections.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. All right, so I don't see any more questions on there. So, so I did want to kind of end off by saying, obviously, thank you for presenting, and thank you for everybody for coming to the session and being a part of it. And when you're done with the PhysEd Summit, I do want to direct everybody to physedagogy.com, where you can find a survey for some feedback on the PhysEd Summit and also your professional development certificate. Once again, thank you, and thank you, Jace, for presenting.
All right, and thanks everybody for tuning in, and yeah, I hope you guys have taken something away from this. And if you ever have any questions, I have up there my contact information, so you can follow me on Twitter. I also have a blog. I haven't written one all summer, but it's because it's summer and I wanted to kind of just focus on family and relaxing. So if you ever, so I share some of my ideas on there, kind of share things like in terms of school leadership. So if you're ever kind of wanting to read some kind of good written blogs, you can always check out my blog. But if you have any questions at any time, please don't hesitate to contact me.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.